Just today, the Trump administration released hundreds of previously classified files related to unidentified aerial phenomena. And a group of pastors claims they were part of a secret meeting in which they were told to prepare their congregations for faith shattering disclosure. With the topic of extraterrestrials and UFO once again captivating our social consciousness, some are wondering how we as Christians should be thinking about these fringe topics and ideas. Tonight, we're asking the question, how should Christians handle conspiracy theories? Let's dive in. Welcome to Adam Answers. I'm Adam and I answer, or at least I try to. I certainly don't know everything, but I love wrestling with difficult questions. Today is Friday, May 8th, and I'm so awesome that you've joined me tonight. Just a couple of quick notes before we dive in and I bring in our guest. That's right, we have a guest who has submitted a question. I'm super excited to introduce you to him. But the first thing I want to say is if you have a question that you would like to ask, and I will dedicate an entire episode of the show to the question, please scan that QR code over there in the top left corner. Scan the QR code, it will take you to a form, fill out the form. I'll see the question. There will also be a link to that down below. If you have a question, any question, I would love to hear from you. So go ahead and scan that. The second thing is if you like today's episode, please leave a like, a comment, even better, subscribe. It definitely does help the algorithm, but more importantly, it helps me know that somebody finds this content useful. Another thing I want to mention is that I officially have a separate YouTube channel for Adam Answers. So if you go to Adam Answers Anything, it has its own YouTube channel now. One of the things the almighty algorithm does not appreciate is when you have different niche content in the same channel, because the algorithm's trying to find the appropriate audience for your content, but when you have content that's from different niches, it confuses it. And so I've decided to take the show off of Sonderhouse and put it in its own channel. So there's still the Sonderhouse YouTube channel, which hopefully you're still subscribed to. I'm continuing to make videos for that channel, but there's going to be a separate channel for Adam Answers. And today will be the last day that I will be publishing an episode on Sonderhouse. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend that you go over to Adam Answers Anything. Subscribe to Adam Answers Anything and stay up to date on new episodes, as well as short form content, as well as extra content that I plan on publishing in the future beyond just the episodes. So please be sure that you do that. If you are watching on Facebook or you're listening on Spotify or Apple, it's not as big of a deal, but I would also encourage you, please go subscribe to our YouTube channel, because YouTube's kind of like our main platform that we're kind of doing things. So with that said, again, this is going to be our last live streamed episode on Sonderhouse. So it's been quite a ride, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm just moving to a different channel. So tonight we have a guest, and it's a really good friend of mine. And we're going to be talking about an interesting question, a question that I've talked about before on my YouTube channel quite a while ago. But the question, as I had said in the beginning, is how should Christians handle conspiracy theories? So, welcome with me, Eric Bowden. Eric, it's good to have you here.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you giving me the time to talk.
Well, I appreciate you asking the question, because this is a great question, and I know that there's probably 150 different perspectives on this question. So, first thing I want to ask you is, walk me through what led you to this question.
Sure. So I don't define myself as a conspiracy theorist. First of all, I want to make that very clear. Christian, Bible believing. We went to Bible college together, and I think my journey. I don't know if it's similar to anyone else out there, and so if anyone can comment, that if it's kind of similar, I'd appreciate it. But I feel like it's kind of similar to a lot of people So I was just like your average dude, right? Like just kind of enjoying life, just trying to, be a nice citizen, get a job, go to college, get a job, millennial, that kind of era of like go to college, get a job, and just work and do your best. So I was kind of, apolitical, I would say. Just kind of not really into politics. You're just kind of, nerd stuff like gaming and sports and just kind of typical guy stuff. And it was like that, even through like 2016. And I remember seeing different conspiracies at the time, in the Christian circle, right? Like Q and that whole thing.
Mm,
It's just like, oh, like that's, interesting. I don't know how true that is, but it's just, interesting stuff. But it wasn't until COVID that I really got um, political in the sense of like just consuming political content, right? Like looking at news, reading news like every day, and like looking at different, I would say, alternative news sources just to kind of see like what's out there. Um, so I feel like COVID really affected everybody in a lot of different avenues. Weren't like the response to COVID and the government's response and that sort of thing, and everyone had their ideas and their kind of set beliefs, right? So, and I was trying to just like be rational, right? Like, so I wasn't like I'm never gonna wear a mask or whatever like that, but I was like, is this what's happening here? So that kind of opened the gate for me to kind of consume a lot of content and try to understand what's happening in society, from 2020 onward. So it feels like it was just yesterday, right? But it's been like 6 years since COVID. So I consumed a whole bunch of content, and now that we're here in 2026, there's UFO files being released, right? And there's people saying lots of things, right? And it's hard to know what to believe,
mhm,
what not to believe. And from a Christian
mhm,
perspective, I see a lot of people jumping on like a political side, right? And I think conspiracy kind of comes from that. And I think we can get into that term of like, what is a conspiracy theory?
mm,
And, I feel like Christians really jump on that for whatever reason. And
mhm,
then like, what is our role in figuring that out? So I really appreciate your platform and talking about these things. I feel like, one, society, we don't talk about things like this and explain how to have a proper dialogue with people, right? So
mhm, mhm,
we can be civil and disagree with each other, and we can coexist. Like it's going to be okay if we have disagreeing thoughts. But I think some of these things intertwine, like politics, religion, and
mhm,
those are things that don't come up because people get very heated. But we need to
mhm,
show people how to have like a proper discourse. I really appreciate your channel and being open to absolutely anything at all. Or Adam answers absolutely anything at all.
well,
I think
I appreciate that.
the merch idea, right? You can have just like like on a
Ah,
shirt.
alliteration. I
Yeah.
love it, I love it.
So
Well, I appreciate that so much. That is one of my goals about the with the channel is to explore questions, especially as Christians. A lot of times there's questions that we just don't explore, don't consider, and the whole point of the channel is just let's just head for it and just see what we discover and be committed to discovering truth wherever the truth might lead us. So, as we always do with Adam Answers, one of the things that we want to do is figure out what it is that we're asking. So, when it comes to conspiracy theory, I think it's important that we maybe try and define that. Merriam Webster's dictionary defines conspiracy theory as a theory that explains an event or set of circumstances as the result of a secret plot by unusually or usually powerful conspirators. Wikipedia, which is, the all trustful source, Wikipedia says the conspiracy theory is an explanation for an event or situation that asserts the existence of asserts the existence of conspiracy or something in which other explanations are not more probable. Britannica Encyclopedia Britannica defines conspiracy theory as an attempt to explain harmful or tragic events as the result of the actions of a small, powerful group. What is conspiracy theory? What does that word phrase mean to you, and how should we define it moving forward with our conversation?
Right. And I think that's, a great question because I feel like the word conspiracy theory, brings out thoughts of like, totally out there beliefs like flat earth and we're all living in, whatever, like whatever conspiracy, that's out there, right? But
Hmm.
I would define it, kind of similar, right? Like something that without evidence that there's a collaboration of like a group of people that are trying to plot a crime of some sort, right? Or
Hmm.
cover up the truth of a crime. Because there is a difference between a proven conspiracy, right? And that's something that people are charged with. Like that's a separate crime. So if you're conspiring to steal, you get charged for stealing, and also the plot of trying to
Hmm.
plan this out. Like that's a separate crime on your list there from the judge.
Hmm.
So I feel like, conspiracy theories are linked to big government. And, I think that's kind of where the Christian kind of thing comes in. And I was saying politics and religion and stuff kind of intersect with the conspiracy theory. But conspiracies happen all the time, like proven conspiracies. If I just Google um, charged with conspiracy or arrested for or whatever, like conspiracies happen, and you can see in your neighborhood or in the news different people in small time, right? Like they
Hmm.
two three people or a group come together and they plot something. um,
Hmm.
so I think the theory part is the tricky part because it's like unproven. Like you can
Hmm.
be suspecting of something. And I guess like that's kind of where this question will evolve, right? Like how suspicious should Christians be? Because I know we're called to be loving and love God,
Hmm.
love others. Like that's the two main things boiled down, right? Love
Hmm.
God with all your heart and love people as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Hmm.
But I think in a world where conspiracy actually does happen, um, at whatever scale that we can see it does happen. um
Hmm.
like how as Christians do we be suspicious, or should we be
Hmm.
suspicious of things? And how do we handle that kind of thing? Because I'm looking here, like New York Post, there's a story of like there's 28 people arrested for something really bad that I don't even want to talk about on this
Hmm.
channel. Like you can
Hmm.
probably look that up for yourself.
Hmm.
So like that's, I would say, a group of people conspiring to do something really bad on a Disney
Hmm.
cruise ship, or different cruise ships. From what I read in the story, it's not just Disney. um,
Hmm.
that is a group of people. So I think that's kind of where maybe this conversation can lead to, like how
Hmm.
suspicious should we be? And I
Right.
think my view now is like I feel inside of me that I am just innately suspicious and I don't want
Mhm.
to be. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
want to love people, but then if something does happen and you're like, oh, this person said this, but then they're turning around and doing this, like it's like,
Mhm.
and I know we shouldn't be surprised about that because, we live in a fallen world, a sinful world, and I'm, chief among them. Paul says that, but I have to believe that I'm the worst sinner of them all. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I
so
like
I think, sorry,
I
go ahead.
like how you're talking about, conspiracies in the sense that they happen all the time. I think a lot of times when we think of conspiracy theory, we kind of attribute the word conspiracy to, like, way out there, just like Illuminati, Freemason, stuff like that. But in reality, like, it happens every day. Like, people conspire to do something. And so I think that's a good point to keep in mind so that we can differentiate between the use of the word in the hyperbolic sense and then the use of the word in the everyday sense. So I like that point that you made there. But I'll let you continue your thought.
No, so I think, again, conspiracy theories, and going back to the Christian, kind of going back in time, right? Like there are a lot of theories out there
Mhm.
that, like you said, are way out there. And I think Christians do kind of fall into this not say trapped, but it kind of is like, um, they're kind of innately distrustful of people. And
Yeah.
my thought on that is there's almost like kind of two general points of view, and I'm sure there's others. I'm overgeneralizing, but religious people, I would say for the most part, or especially Christians, we view the world and humanity as flawed, right?
Mm,
So anyone who's in authority, or anyone at all that you meet, like, could have that potential to do really flawed and bad things. And like
mhm,
you said, it does happen. um so I think that almost comes from, I would say, the Bible itself, because there is a conspiracy in the Bible, a plot to cover up
hmm,
Jesus's resurrection, right? So that, I think,
yeah,
is the main point, because I think we can't say like, oh, we have to listen. Like, let's say I'm in Rome, and they're like, didn't you hear the government said that we have to, that Jesus, that was all fake. And like, as a Christian, that's like the focal point of your belief. You have to believe
mhm,
in the resurrection. Paul says that
mhm,
very clearly. Without that resurrection, nothing matters, really, basically.
mhm,
So we have to believe in the resurrection, right? And
mhm,
if you believe in Almighty God, that's really not that hard, right? If there's Almighty God, He can resurrect anything, right? He can do
mhm,
anything. So we'd have to go against that narrative if we're living in Roman time. So I don't know your
mm,
thoughts
yeah,
on that. Like, as
yeah,
is
no,
that,
yeah,
maybe I'm off base? Is that a conspiracy, or am I looking at it the wrong
yeah,
way?
for sure. I mean, that's probably one of the most, probably one of the clearest examples of conspiracy in Scripture, because there's quite a few, including in the Old Testament. The Roman guard trying to cover up the fact that Jesus was no longer in the grave, and there was a conspiracy to cover it up, and money was involved as well. And one of the points that you made was, you're talking about how it's natural for us as Christians to kind of be skeptical of things because we live in a fallen world. I think it's a really interesting point, because as Christians, like I believe in total depravity, so I believe that people aren't born just like neutral, morally neutral. They're born just sinful, separated from God, wicked, and divisive in their own ways. Everyone does what is right in their own eyes, and I I definitely see your point that it is probably easier for us to assume that, okay, well, something nefarious is probably going on. Here's something really bad that's happening. Well, it's probably because something people are being very nefarious. So it's like easier for us to believe in conspiracies like QAnon, for example, because we naturally have a disposition to just believe that people are very, very wicked and evil. And I think on top of that, I would say that we have a predisposition to see the world beyond just its physical state, but also the rulers and principalities and darkness that rule the air. That we see the world not just as random atoms bumping into each other, random decisions being made by people, physical forces. We don't just see the world like that, but we also see spiritual forces that are behind those physical forces. We see good and evil. We see demonic influence. If you've ever read the Screw Tape Letters, it's like such an interesting book, because it it gives you an insight, or not insight, but a perspective on evil in a way that you may not have had that perspective before. And so when we look at terrible things, like for example, Jeffrey Epstein, we look at things like that. To us, it's this is demonic. Yeah, of course, this is demonic. And to us, it's shocking but not surprising, because we believe that the world is the Satan is the ruler of this world. Um, and he walks around like a prowling lion, seeking whom to devour. And because we believe that, we believe, of course, there's evil like that. And I think the fact that it's unveiled is shocking, but to us, it's like, yeah, of course, that's a thing that we've always believed. So yeah, I would agree with your observation that there is absolutely conspiracy in Scripture. I think that when I think of the word conspiracy, the first thing my mind usually thinks of is Gnosticism, actually. Because if you think about Gnosticism, it was one of the first things that the early church faced was the Gnostic gospel, and it was this idea that there's secret hidden knowledge within Scripture, and if you have this secret hidden knowledge, then you're enlightened or powerful or something. You have the secret to eternal life or something like that. And that's obviously a heresy, and that's obviously something the church wrestled with. But I think that in a lot of sense, conspiracy theories have that same aesthetic. They have that same style. They have that same look. It's as though you possess this secret knowledge that no one else possesses, and you see the world for what it really is. So you say that the moon doesn't exist. It's really just a giant spaceship, and everyone thinks you're crazy, but you possess the knowledge that they don't possess, and so you know
Right.
why the moon's not real. You
You're
know what
the
I'm saying?
one, like you're Neo, right, from the Matrix.
Yeah.
You can do, like, you figure it out. Or I like Nicolas Cage, like
Hmm.
from what's that movie where he like finds the declaration, like only that guy knows
Oh
where the
yeah, National
declaration is.
Treasure.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
he's the one. Like everyone else, they don't know, but he's the one who knows. And I think
Hmm.
like that kind of goes to the point, like you don't want to get duped too, right? Like you don't want to like, yeah, like, okay, guys, like trust everything, and we're gonna be like, you don't want to
Hmm.
be the one. I think too, like when it comes to Christian perspectives on that, I think a lot of COVID and stuff, a lot of the terms that were coming up were like the mark of the beast, right? People
Hmm.
don't want to get duped into taking the mark of the beast, and there's a lot of I don't say
Hmm.
misunderstanding, but like just we still have to kind of flesh that out. I think as like that means or
Hmm.
looks like, but I clear like you would know that it was like a faith altering thing if you take the mark of the beast. It's not like you're going to accidentally take the mark of the beast. And from what I've seen from Revelation, but I think Christians, a lot of Christians out there were like very concerned, that this could be that thing
Hmm.
that's happening like right now. For
Yeah.
what I've
Yeah.
seen, from that Christian perspective as well.
Yeah, because again, Christians can tend to be skeptical because Jesus said there will be wars and rumors of wars, and a lot of people. I feel like every generation. I could be wrong. This is just my observation. Every Christian generation grows up, and when they reach a certain age, I'll call it the Silver Saints age. Maybe they're like beyond 60 or 65 years old. They suddenly everything becomes like like eschatology to them. Everything becomes the end times to them. They'll look at the news. They're a lot more easy to say, "Oh, the Lord must be returning. It's things are bad, worse today than they've ever been in my lifetime." And I feel like every generation has said that and done that at a certain point to a certain degree. And the next generation grows up and they're idealistic and then they become old. And then for them, oh, the world's just, yeah, everything's horrible. Of course, the Lord's going to return soon. I mean, of course, if I was like in my 80s, I'd love for the Lord to return soon, so you don't have to go through the process of death. But I feel like that's a thing. And so there's a temptation to look at everything that's going on in the landscape of our culture and our society and attribute some sort of revelation, apocalyptic, eschatological thing to that. Like just attribute to that. Like, oh no, no, look, Monster Energy drink, 666, right there. See, I told you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, evil's coming back. Uh, and it kind of makes me think, okay, but like what kinds of people are conspiracy theorists? Because we've kind of nailed down an idea of what we mean when we talk about conspiracy theory. We're talking about things that people believe that there's a shadow government, that there's some dark thing or force or whatever power to be that's hidden that no one can see that's controlling a thing or causing an outcome. But what kinds of people are the people that tend to believe in this? And one of the claims that I've heard, this is even just what I used to just think that, and this is obviously not from everyone, but certainly from a good number of people, is that evangelical Christians are the most likely group of people to believe in conspiracy theories. That's just kind of vaguely what I feel is the cultural consensus. Could be wrong, but I've definitely felt, especially in 2020. It's kind of like the idea that, there's the crunchy anti-vaxxer mom. They're more likely to be evangelical. There's like the flat earthers. They're more likely to be religious. And I've certainly heard these claims before. So I wanted to do my own research to figure out for myself what kinds of people are conspiracy theorists or conspiracy minded. And I discovered three things, just real quick. The first is that of Christians, those who are biblical literalists, so like they interpret the Bible literally, uh, religious fundamentalists, and or Christian nationalists, those three categories, they have the highest correlation to conspiracy thinking. And when we say conspiracy thinking, we just mean a baseline worldview that you just naturally assume that major events are the product of actually hidden forces. So, like 9/11 happens, you just automatically assume that it was a government cover up or something. According to a 2021 Baylor Religion Survey published by the Baylor Institute for Studies of Religion, Christians who hold a specific ideological framework are more susceptible to modern conspiracy theories than the general public. The survey data revealed that Christians who adhere to strict biblical literalism, interpreting the Bible literally, were more significantly likely than other Americans to believe in conspiracies, like QAnon, for example, or election denial, where that like space doesn't exist. Sociologists analyzing this data concluded that it's not necessarily that the Christian faith alone drives this. That's important. That was the important part of the study. That they're not saying that it's Christian faith alone that decides this, but rather the specific intersection of biblical literalism and Christian nationalism that act as the strongest indicators for conspiracy thinking in the U.S. 1 year later, in 2022, a study was published in Politics and Governance found that general religious belief does not automatically lead to conspiracy thinking, but religious fundamentalism does. The researchers discovered that any initial correlation they found between general religiosity and a conspiracy mentality disappeared once they accounted for fundamentalism. So they concluded that individuals with high religious fundamentalism, those who they view their specific religious beliefs or dogmas or teachings as absolute and reject all other alternative viewpoints as religious fundamentalism, that they are significantly more likely to endorse conspiracy theories. So I thought that was interesting that it's not that being Christian makes you more likely to be a conspiracy theorist or conspiracy minded, but it's an intersection of Christian nationalism, biblical literalism, and fundamentalism. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think is that interesting, that stand out?
Yeah, and I think you can look at it from a couple different ways. Like I said, politics and religion kind of merge, right? So I think there's people who are purely political and are out there and don't trust the government, thinking like are libertarians. And I think I am registered as a libertarian, not the official Libertarian Party, but like
Yeah.
they're deeply distrustful of any person in government because if you're in government, you can be corrupted, not necessarily with a conspiracy, but like you might lose your interests of your people, right? Like you get in there and then you get all this money from these big donors and like vote this way or and then you're not really, so that's not a conspiracy, that's just like a human like making a choice based on what they're getting. So I think like there's a lot of that now that I've seen, just kind of that just deep distrust of government from what they've seen, and religion is out of it. Second, I would say to that study, like I wonder, like, and I know like bias and stuff, like people say we're unbiased, but I feel like bias is innately in everything, right? Like you can never fully take that out. And it's like I wonder, there's probably a lot of other religions that might be distrustful, and it's like why, just asking the question, right? Like
Yeah.
why just Christian nationalism? And I do see it, right? I do see it, but like
Yeah.
is it like just Christians? And it's like that's a
Right.
little strange. Like why just Christians?
Yeah. No, that's a good
Or are
point.
we,
Yeah.
are we kind of biased and looking at it because we want to
Mhm.
see that as the result, and obviously like I would have to look at the methodologies of how they conducted it, and that would be very boring. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we you
No.
know we so yeah, that's kind of what I would say to that too. And then your
Yeah.
point about I just wanted to go back and touch on this too about um you know as Christians kind of get older, they start thinking about the end times. Because my mother is big into the end times and stuff. She's been in it for a while, and she would tell me to that point. She would say that was before Israel became a nation again.
Mm,
So like big things have happened since that point, which is like part of the end times like narrative in Revelation.
mhm,
So I think, you know, the concept of time, obviously, and from the Bible perspective, like a day is like 1,000 years. Like it's, who know, like no one knows when. Like God said it,
mhm,
no one knows when the hour. But like there are a lot of interesting things happening. So again, like, am I looking too much into that? Then I guess is like,
right,
am I like that's
right,
happening? And then like, that's a hot topic right now too, like Israel and
mhm,
nations helping them and stuff like that. But it's like from a strictly biblical perspective, like it's very interesting that they're
yeah,
back on the map and a lot of things are happening. And, um, you know, again, like religion, everything kind of intertwines again, which is like why I like your channel, right? Like I go back and I saw your video on the conspiracy theorists way back, a couple years ago, and you just had a talk on politics. And like I said, like all these are kind of interconnecting, and it's just like how do we? It's
mhm,
hard not to be suspicious at this point, as a Christian, and I don't want to be that way because again, we're supposed to love people,
mhm.
and it's like how do we like turn our cheek if all these things are happening. And
Yeah,
I guess
I
that's
like
just my
the
struggle, that
no,
it's like I,
no, go ahead.
I was just like, there these things happening, and it's like, it's just it eats at you, you know what I mean? Like it's just like constant, like life is tough, right? Like it's just constant, whether it's a conspiracy or just like people being sin nature or whatever, like it's hard to keep the faith and keep being consistent. And I look at like I think about this a lot, like Solomon, right? Like he had the greatest like kingdom of Israel, and when he finally consecrated the temple, like fire came down from heaven. But
Mhm,
then later on, like he had like all these religions that he just let in, and he like faded. So like you can go from fire coming down from heaven to light the temple incense or whatever, like
mhm,
to like totally out, like just so like it's like life just does that to people. And it's
mhm.
hard to, you know at least for me, coming from my perspective, it's hard to see some of this corruption, because I think there is corruption in government. It's just hard to see that, you know and knowing from the Christian perspective that we have to love people. And um so I don't necessarily disagree with your that assertion. Like I do
Mhm.
think Christians, and like the whole Q thing, like that is like, people are quick to believe in things. And I would say, like, if people are out there like walking through their thoughts, right? Like talking out loud, and like
Mhm.
going back and forth with people, like kind of seeing what led you to believe that. If there's some substance there, like I would kind of, you know like have more of a belief in that,
Yeah.
like, because like said, my mom said about the whole Israel being,
Yeah.
so that's substance to that argument.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of people just parrot, like, well, that's what I heard, so I'm saying it again. Or like, I read this
Yeah,
news article, so
absolutely.
I'm just saying it again. So it's like there's no backing behind that. There's no thought behind it, or like minimal thought, I would say, behind it. Like they haven't fleshed out all those thoughts and questions, or counterpoints. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I said a lot there, but I would be interested in your thoughts, like about, you know conspiracies, like from more of like the Christian's perspective, right? Like the so like politics aside for a second, right? Like why are Christians quick to believe? Is it like that mark of the beast thing, or like what are your thoughts on like why are Christians kind of susceptible to a lot of these things, or like people are studying them, like, so whether we agree on the results or not, people are studying them.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. I think we had a disconnect there.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Probably on my end, sorry.
No, you're good, you're good. You're good. You
Uh,
were talking about, your mom, your mom and end time beliefs, and then you froze. I don't know. Maybe I froze. I don't know if you
Oh
froze,
no,
but
I would say it's probably me. So all right, so let's back it up. So I would say like the going back to what Israel, like Israel became a nation, right? And my
mhm,
mom would say that is a really huge thing in end times. So
mhm,
I was saying like that point was like if people have like a belief about something, or they have a thought process behind it, like to kind of flesh it out and to talk about
mhm,
it, so that way like it's hard to kind of tell the people who are just parroting things, right? Like
mhm,
and saying like well, that's like the mark of the beast because like someone else said it.
mhm,
Like, but it's like if you say, I think this is happening and this is important for X, Y, and Z reason, and you have
mhm.
some thought behind it, like that's kind of important to flesh out. So we were talking about like that study, right, on the religious
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. I
So
want to go
I
back
would
to
say to
that.
that, like, yeah, like it's you know, if you have some thought behind it, I would be more prone to listen to what your point of view is. But if you're
Mhm.
like, this is the mark of the beast, and the COVID shot's gonna,
Right.
make me
Yeah.
not a Christian, like, why? And then you're like, well, I just think that way. Like,
Mhm.
I think, that could be a reason for, um, why Christians are so susceptible to that. But again, I would also question the validity of that study too, perhaps as well, just a
Right.
piece of
Right.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to the conversation about that study, it's interesting because those first two studies, we kind of come to this conclusion. Okay, it's not that just being an evangelical Christian makes you more likely to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's the intersection of biblical literalism, um, fundamentalism, and Christian nationalism. Okay, so but is it like the is it the case that that comprises the most people who are conspiracy theorists? Is those categories? Because this kind of reiterates the point that one of the studies made, that it's not necessarily that just being a Christian alone makes you more likely to be or predisposed to be a conspiracy theorist. But according to a 2024 study that was published in Politics and Religion, rigid thinking patterns and alternative spiritualities are massive predictors of conspiracy beliefs, sometimes outpacing mainstream religion entirely, which I thought was very interesting. The researchers discovered two fascinating things. The first thing they discovered is that extreme literal interpretations of the world strongly correlate with conspiracy beliefs. And this applies equally to those who are religious as well as to those who are dogmatic atheists. It doesn't matter. It's the idea of having literal interpretations, strongly held literal interpretations of the world. The second thing they found, a remarkably stable and strong association between holistic spirituality, which is like new age mysticism, that kind of spirituality, a strong correlation association between holistic spirituality and conspiracy theories. They concluded that individuals practicing holistic spirituality often have higher rates of conspiracy thinking than mainstream Christians, because both New Age spirituality and conspiracy theories rely heavily on intuitive logic or intuitive feeling or reasoning. And they share a foundational belief that hidden truths are being actively suppressed by the mainstream media. So that's very interesting. So, in other words, we've come from this presupposition that, okay, well, if you're a Christian, then you're just more likely to be a conspiracy theorist. It's kind of cultural like idea, to, okay, well, it's Christian, but then you're a biblical literalist, fundamentalist, nationalist. Well, now we're saying that it has nothing to do with being a Christian, and has everything to do with the way that you think about the world. And it just so happens that biblical literalists have a literal interpretation of the world. Well, so do other identities. So do other people who aren't even religious or are of a different religious persuasion. It has to do with literal thinking, that kind of mindset. So people who aren't spiritual aren't they are people who aren't spiritual are just as likely to end up as a conspiracy minded person as people who are spiritual. New Age spiritualists are highly conspiracy minded, but so are Christian fundamentalists and nationalists and literalists. And this leads me to a third study that gets kind of, I think this gets to the root of the question, which the original question is what kinds of people tend to be conspiracy theorists. And it kind of connects all these demographics together. According to a 2025 study published in Social Sciences, people who possess conspiratorial belief tend to tend to have one or more of these character traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and or psychopathy. Narcissism characterizes people who, tend to be self-focused, they're self-absorbed, they have a need to be unique and special. Machiavellianism, these are the types of people who are very manipulative. They're highly transactional and very cynical. And then psychopathy is characterized with high impulsivity, so just very impulsive and very low empathy. Even more telling, this is the last one, even more telling was a 2023 study which found that individuals who score high in narcissism and who readily adopt a conspiracy mindset rely heavily on intuitive thinking, like going with their gut, rather than analytical thinking. The researchers discovered that cognitive reflection, which is the specific ability to pause, override your initial gut feeling or reaction, and critically evaluate information. That's what cognitive reflection is. But it acts as a protective barrier. When individuals possessed high cognitive reflection, it significantly reduced the impact of their narcissistic traits on their willingness to endorse conspiracy theories. So what was the point of all those scientific studies? The point was this. I think it's very interesting to me that the scientific studies, for me, kind of narrowed down the kinds of people that are most likely and most strongly associated with conspiratorial mindset. It's not just being a Christian. It's not just being religious. In fact, atheists are just as predisposed, but it's being strongly led by intuitive thinking, which is often coupled with narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. So I think that's really interesting because I think about intuitive thinking, people who think with their guts or think with their feelings, right? They feel a certain thing, and to them, that's truth. And that leads me to think about this story. This is a story, I think you had mentioned this, and I had looked into it yesterday, or no, it's 2 days ago. But very recently, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this before I kind of dive into my thoughts. There's a whole group of pastors who claim to have been contacted by some people. We don't know if it was a government agency or some people that worked in the agency, and they met at like an Airbnb somewhere at an undisclosed location, and their phones were turned off and all this. This is a secret meeting, and at this meeting, these government people, whoever they work for the government or whatnot, informed these pastors that they need to prepare their congregation because what's going to be disclosed is going to be faith shattering, and people need to be prepared to have their faith challenged. So before I give my thoughts, I want to hear what your thoughts are on this kind of like this
Right. So
story.
yeah. And I've kind of followed up on that story too. And from what I'm reading from articles, right, and I think we could probably, you could probably do another episode on the media, because like I'm reading, it says this pastor accepts apology over the other pastors, or I think no, it's a congressman. Congressman accepts apology over pastor's alien inventing Jesus comments. But I go down and read it, and he's not apologizing for what was said. He was more apologizing for like the method of how, like, it was a miscommunication. But the meeting did happen according to
Mm-hmm.
this article, right? So if you read the headline, you'd be like, okay, like, he just made it up. But it's like, no, like the meeting happened. So like, you know, I have a couple of thoughts, right? So one, maybe we need to define Christian, right? Because like, I think we're on the same page. Like, believe in the Bible, inerrant word of Scripture. Jesus is God. He came to save us from our sins. Um, love God, love others. Like, but I think the Bible also says like narrow is the way, right? People will think that they're on the path to salvation and not be. And I think the trouble is only God knows that, right? So I don't. It's not for me to judge. I don't know. So I just, again,
Mm-hmm.
I'm suspicious. Are you saying I'm a psychopath though, Adam?
No,
I
no,
have
no.
psychopathic tendencies now. So, I'm just, I just know what the Bible says. And I'm like, what do you mean by Christian, I guess? And
Yeah.
two, again, like we do know the end time, whatever form it comes, it's coming, right? Every day is a day closer. And it's interesting that it was a group of Christians that met.
Mm.
What about the other religion? I'm sure they're going to have some trouble if this ever gets quote unquote released.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's just interesting that it's just Christians and not any other beliefs that are meeting to prep about this.
Mhm.
Um, because again, like I believe the Bible 100%, like, interdimensional beings or whatever, like that supposedly made Jesus, or made the earth. Like, that goes against what I believe then, right? So
Mhm.
I'm going to
Yeah.
have to say like no to that. So like, and that's almost like people would say, well, that's cognitive dissonance, right? Like, I'm sticking to my belief, so I'm going to like shift what I hear that's counteractive to that belief. So it's like, should I be open to alternative things, other than what I'm sticking to, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I would definitely agree with, the points that you made. I think it was interesting because as I read about this story, I was interested in the men that were making these claims, and I don't know I don't I don't know all who was at this meeting, but there's, some podcasts, some videos that were put out, and I looked at one of the podcasts, and there was a whole bunch of guys. They're all pastors, ministry leaders, and I wanted to, like, see, okay, well, like, who are these guys? I've never heard of them before, so who are they? So I looked, did research, found each and every one kind of, like, had their own website, and looked it up, and I found that each and every one of those men were, just based on the descriptions of their beliefs they had on these sites, very charismatic. And that was interesting to me because I'm kind of getting into subjective territory here because this is more of like my personal opinion. When I hear people speaking in a way that sounds like charismatic theology, I become very cautious. The cautious sign goes up, the yellow lights start flashing because in my mind I connect. Remember we were talking about how according to all of these studies that were done, one of the biggest indicators of whether or not someone is conspiracy minded is intuitive thinking. I connect intuitive thinking to charismatic theology. That's the way that I connect those two. Because in my experience, okay, this is the subjective part. In my experience, almost every single person I have known who has prescribed to charismatic theology can also be described as an intuitive thinker. And they're led by their gut feeling. They're led by, oh, I feel this thing is happening, or I feel like God's saying this to me, or I feel like the Spirit's doing this to me, things like that. They're led by these things. I don't want to make a relation there, but I all I have to say about that is it was interesting to me that there's these big claims about UFOs, these big claims being made by these pastors. All of them are a part of all of them, I would say, come from charismatic beliefs, and I associate charismatic beliefs with a very high intuitive thinking. Um, so I just thought that was really interesting. I can't really draw conclusions on that because I don't know any of these men personally. I don't know what the meeting was. All I know is that we have had quite a succession of prophets constantly on YouTube, constantly, over and over and over again. This thing's going to happen. This is going to. The Lord's going to return here. The Lord's going to return here, and He hasn't returned. And this is going to happen, and it doesn't happen. And that's kind of part of the charismatic movement, and so that's why personally I'm very cautious about it. My red lights go up, um, and I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I'm also just concerned about where this is coming from to begin with.
Right. And I think, like, to a certain extent, like, we're to like test, our beliefs, in a sense. Like, we need to be ready for some of those false prophets and things like that. So it's like, you kind of do have to be if what I'm hearing is correct, like a little skeptical, of one, like if you're like skeptical of the government or skeptical
Mhm.
of like other beliefs, like just kind of, the Bible, and we're testing it against the Bible, and you're saying like it's, and I think we're kind of saying the same thing too, like there's going to be a lot of people who think they're on the path, and
Mhm.
for whatever reason they kind of miss it, right? So so yeah, I do think that kind of makes a lot of sense, um
Mhm.
with why a lot of people, and Christians in particular, kind of fall into, jumping on whatever it is that's kind of like the hot button issue. And
Mhm.
again, if there's someone of substance, or like that has something of substance that can kind of walk me through their thought process of what it
Mhm.
is, and like you said, not like an impulsive, like I just felt that way, and so that's why, he gave me this weird look, and I think that means this. And it's like,
Mhm.
if you can kind of explain like X, Y, and Z thoughts that are in my head, and now that's why I believe that, like I would be more open to hearing more about that. But if it's just like that impulse, like you said, or it's like we didn't really think about it that much, we just had that feeling, or you know,
Mhm.
um, I think that makes a lot of sense to me from what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about, because we're talking about how Christians should handle this topic, this question. And I think about actually one of the things I was talking about last week, which, by the way, there is going to be a follow up episode to last week's episode. I forgot to mention this at the beginning today. So, just a side note, uh, Nate and I were actually going to be doing a follow up episode for those listening to last week's episode, but Nate was sick this week, so we didn't do it this week. But next week, hopefully, that's the plan. We're going to do a follow up to last week's episode about the nuclear family. But in that episode, I talked about childlike faith, or was it that episode or the episode before? I think it was actually 2 episodes ago. And I keep thinking about that as we're talking about this conversation, because I think, well, Jesus said a house divided among itself cannot stand. And he said that when the Pharisees accused him of casting out demons in the name of demons, in the name of Beelzebub. And he said, a house divided amongst itself cannot stand. And I think that conspiratorial thinking is a way that the enemy certainly divides us. And it certainly uses it as a tool for us to form tribes among each other. And those tribes they break fellowship with one another because they think about the world so differently. Um, because they have different ideas about things. But when I think about when Jesus talks about childlike faith, I think that a part of it is recognizing God's utter sovereignty, and knowing that even if I'm never going to know if birds are real, and if the moon's just a space station, if I'm never going to get to the bottom of that, it doesn't matter, because I trust with all my heart that God is sovereign, and we already know the ending. We already know the ending. We have it. It's in a book called the Bible. It's a great, great book. And because of that, we already know that Jesus is won on the cross. None of these conspiracies shape my worldview. Like, none of them shape my ability to trust in Jesus. None of them shape or prevent me from being a steward of what God's given me, or my calling to the Great Commission, or my faith in God's sovereign will, that what He has willed is going to be done. It doesn't, because I know the ending. I know I know that Christ will be glorified and that He will return. And so I keep thinking about that as we're like thinking about this question. And I think that's one of the reasons why Paul says, like, whatever is lovely, think on these things. Um, because a lot of times when we start thinking about conspiracy theories and we go down those rabbit holes, we are led to dark places. And those dark places pull us away from relationships that we shouldn't be pulled away from. And so my mind goes often in that direction. In Isaiah, actually, God talks about, God's telling the prophet Isaiah. This was during a time of like instability, geopolitical instability. There was the kingdom of Judah; it was under threat from an alliance between Israel and Syria. And in response, the people of Judah were terrified, And as a result, there's tons of rumors and paranoia about what's going on. Like, oh, did you hear about this? So this is going to happen, or they're going to do this, or oh, did you hear about this? Like, oh yeah, Trump's going to show up and arrest everybody. Like, did you hear about that? There's rumors about what's going to happen, and it's in this context that God speaks to Isaiah, and he says, "Do not call conspiracy everything this people calls a conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear, and do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread." And I mean, this is Isaiah, so this is like definitely God's omnipotence. He's showing his transcendence and his omnipotence, but he's also showing his sovereignty here. Like he's in control of what's happening, and that a lot of times these rumors and paranoia, its purpose is to just divide a house so that it cannot stand. And the enemy has done a pretty good job doing that in the church. Paul talks about,
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah. I keep going back to a couple Bible verses too, and I think this is why it's so hard for me. I think because like as someone who's been to Bible college, like I kind of know, but it's like I don't really. Sometimes I don't want to accept, So like,
Mhm.
and like our pastor talked about Romans, like we're going through Romans. So Romans 12, Romans 13, right? Romans 13, submit to governing authorities, right? No matter how corrupt they are, and the Roman authority
Mhm.
was corrupt. In Romans 12, 18 in particular, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all people, right? All
Mm.
people. And I guess going back to the whole purpose, like you were saying, like people want to be the one, they want to be the one to figure it out. Is that what, like, is that for them? Is that for like, if I
Mhm.
do, I want to be the one who knows everything and figures it out and be like, I told you so, right? Like the birds, right? The
Mhm.
birds. Or like, what was 5G, man, 5G, right? um
Right.
but like you said, like it doesn't matter if you're first, or it's going to happen no matter what. Like, if it's true, right? Like it's going to happen,
Mhm.
and God's in control of that. God's in control of the people in government. If it is, big government, and God's, in control of the local area. If there's people conspiring, to steal in your local, local area, like God knows all of it. So I think, like, like you're saying too, like it's we need to be at peace. And
Mhm.
it's just really hard, for me to like just
Mm.
kind of accept that, um just because I've seen the people that we need to be at peace with, and it's like really hard to um kind of admit that that's accurate. And I would almost characterize that, like, I don't like saying this, right? Like I have almost like a spirit of Jonah, right? Like,
Mm.
um like how the Bible said, like, John the Baptist had the spirit of Elijah, like this great prophet in the Old Testament. And it's like, I think, like, I'm just skeptical of people. And it's like, God had to force Jonah to get on his way, um, you know, to follow his command to preach to the Ninevites. And then he preached it, and then he was like, they're gonna mess it up. Like, I'm waiting for it, and it didn't happen. Like, just kind of, he was almost like super skeptical in a sense. Like, he's like, this is kind of like, why am I talking to
Mm.
these Ninevites? Like, so like I wonder, like, just kind of being aware of my what's happening inside of me, like is almost helpful in a sense, like just trying to counteract that spirit, because I do want people, I want to love people, I want to help people, um, and I don't want to be bitter, skeptical, alone, like, you know,
Mhm.
by myself. So, um, so I do appreciate those thoughts, from the Bible as well. I think Second Peter 2 talks about submitting to authority, in a time where Nero was like hunting down Christians. Like, if
Mhm.
you read some of the stuff that happened there, like that was really, really tough, like
Mhm.
inhumane stuff that we would like, it just, I don't want to speak about it again on this podcast, but people can look it up. Like, it was really bad
Mhm.
in Nero's time for Christians. So, um, which almost like I want to, I don't know if you're cool with talking about like the political side of things for a
Mhm.
second, because we were talking more about the spiritual side. But and I kind of got this from your
Mhm,
other episode that you did on politics, and
mhm,
kind of similar thought. Like, we live in an era where we're allowed to speak up, right? Like, we're allowed,
mhm,
we have freedom of speech, and I love that about America, but it's like, why what are we using our speech for, right? Like,
mhm,
um, for whatever political ideology that we have, right? Like, what's the purpose that we're using that speech for? Um, because, like you said, like, God's in control, back in Isaiah's time and here, and it's like, I wonder, a lot of Christians
mm.
associate, again, like, intertwining religion and politics, and it's like, do they want to be right? Is it like about them, and that's why they're like, trying to find that um government conspiracy, specifically government. um so I don't know, like, your thoughts on that, or um
No, I think that that's definitely part of it. I think there is a natural tendency to want to be right or to belong to the correct tribe, I should say. Um, and you want your view and perspective about the world to be validated. Because one of the things that happens as you get older is the beliefs that you have become more and more fine tuned. Like, it's like cement. When you're really young, especially in your early 20s, mid 20s, your beliefs, the way that you see and perceive the world, it's very fluid. It's just like super liquidy cement. And as you get older, that cement tends to dry. And as a result, it becomes more difficult for your framework about seeing the world to change. That's why, you see people who, as they get older, become much more vehement defenders of certain things that they believe in, the way that they see the world. Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, if I'm wrong, then like 35 years of my life is wrong. Like, if I'm wrong, all of this is for naught. And I have to just completely radically change everything about myself. And let's say you're like, 50 years old. So I think that is a very small part of it. I think that when you get to a certain age bracket, above a certain age, it's more difficult for you to change those beliefs. Even though it is the case statistically that people become slightly more conservative as they get older, but that's more so in a general sense, not necessarily in a political sense. But so I'd say that's maybe one thing, and then I would say that another thing is, we live in a very, very confusing world. And as humans, what we love to do is put things in categories so that we understand it. Because God has created an incredibly complex universe, an incredibly complex world, and incredibly complex people. And we can spend our entire lives trying to fully understand it, but we never will. But what we love to do is put things in categories so that we say, okay, I understand this. We do this with personalities. It's like, oh, you're a 4 on the Enneagram. You're an INFJ. We like to categorize things because in our mind, it's like, okay, here is a label. I know what that label means, so I know everything about this person. Why? Because then we don't have to expend energy trying to understand somebody. Because one of the things our brains are constantly doing is it's constantly trying to be efficient. And it's more efficient if our brains can just label something as a thing and then shovel that away, like, into our long-term memory. So, like, if I know that the best way to grow grass is give it water, well, I never have to, like, do experiments to figure out how to grow grass. I just know how to grow grass. Just put water on it. Treat your grass good. Humans do that with each other. And it's easier, it's very easy, and it's our instinct to ascribe simplistic terms to people so that we understand them better. That's why humans are tribal. So when you look at the other, which is just anyone else that isn't your belief system, and how they see the world, you have incredibly simplistic characteristics that define them. They have pink hair, they have a nose piercing, um, they're abortionists, transgenderists, all these things. And they hate America. They hate white people. These are all simplistic presuppositions or stereotypes that it's easier for your brain to just assume that all of those are true about someone who's on the left than to actually do the work in getting to know the individual and examining their individual beliefs. Everyone does this. And it's another reason that division's so hard to close. That's another reason why it's so hard to close the fissure in our society once it's been opened. Because millions of people have just already decided that this is the kinds of people that they are. That Trump supporters are mentally insane, retarded, they're just, part of a cult. And that's the terminology that we use. It's just put it in a category. That's the kind of people. And so I think it's easy for us to, especially people that are conspiratorial minded, it is almost, I shouldn't say never, but it's very difficult for them to look at anything in the world critically, because in their minds they've already categorized everything as suspicious. So in their minds, it's not a big leap for them to just start saying that space doesn't exist, because they've already made fundamental assumptions about the world and the universe that have already predetermined that everything is suspicious. So I think that's another part of it. Does that get a little bit to what you were saying?
No, absolutely. I think, definitely great points. And you kind of hinted on like society nowadays, which I have another question for you, if you don't mind. Um, it's my opinion, and we're kind of straying off the topic of conspiracy theories from a biblical sense, but like modern day society, right? Um, I feel like we're living in this bubble, and this could be why people are distrustful in general too, right? This
Mhm.
kind of bubble. And I think again, connecting everything together, like you have a video on this on like simulation, quote unquote, like
Yeah.
we're like simulating society because like for like thousands of years, however, whatever humans have like been fighting and stuff like that, and then like 1900s, all of a sudden, like we've like grown
Mhm.
exponentially. Like from Wilbur and Orville Wright flew their little plane to like launching a space, a rocket to the moon. Whether you believe that or not,
Yeah.
I personally do, but
Mhm.
um, you know, in just like 70 years, right? So like in that amount of time, like it's gone, so like, progressed like in from our human sense. So like I think that we as humans, and this might be the other side, like the religious people know humans, and they're kind of skeptical of humans. Whereas, if you're believing that humans are can do anything, we can, if we put our mind to it, like there's no way humans can be that bad and that evil. Like no one would ever do that.
Mhm.
Like you would see this and be like, we're sending people to the moon. Now we're going back around the moon. We're building these tall buildings. Like we're
Mhm.
doing like crazy stuff that we've never really done before as society. We're connected so much more now. Like this conversation would not have happened like 50 years ago, let's say, um, because this technology has expanded so much. So like, I feel like that kind of shows like that humanistic side of things, like the other side of like
Mm.
when people who don't believe in God, they believe humans are going to solve all of our problems. We're going to move to Mars and we're going to have a colony there because we're just going to expand out into the universe, right? Like,
Mhm.
we think that we can do anything. And I almost see, maybe this is, I'm being conspiratorial again. You can tell me um, if I'm being an idiot or not. Maybe that's the next question. Am I an idiot, Adam?
No.
My wife's going to submit that question. So I'm joking, but she might. Um, so am I being conspiratorial? Because like the way I see it, like let's say like again, it's not really conspiracy to twist things or like public relations, right? Like I see this a lot, and I get like really like you can like have like the terrible product, but if you like, it actually doesn't do this. Technically, it does this instead,
Mhm.
but it's like you're kind of blurring the lines between like semantics of like the words and stuff like that. Like you can spin things, and I feel like we've gotten to a point in our society where like you're almost like expecting a lie from these products, right? Like that you're given. Like
Mm,
we're all, there's stuff coming at us all over the place with these products that are out there, and these companies pay big bucks. Like spending
mhm,
on public relations has gone through the roof, and it's like people don't trust products or things like or anything really anymore. Like, like it's that classic example of like it was a weather balloon or whatever, and then or like in a movie, right? Like
mhm,
if you're like, oh, everyone's being conspiratorial, like, the government's fine, everything's fine, and then like literally every movie is like there's a conspiracy, right? And there's that like famous like ironic play where like they make a public announcement in a movie, like
mhm,
this was just a weather balloon, or when it's like Iron Man or something, you know what I mean? Like they're like lying to people, right? Like,
mhm,
and it's like we expect that almost to happen, and like we if you don't even think about it, you're like, okay, yeah, like that's fine, all right. But it's like
mhm.
you're kind of lying to people, right? If you're telling them it's
Yeah.
one thing, but you're kind of thing that's
Mhm,
on maybe that secular point of view of like, do you think we're kind of living in this like, I don't know what you call it, like inflated view of the world
mhm.
of humans, or like, are we actually progressing as a society, or is there terrible things that still happen now? Like if you're just viewing it strictly from a science and human
Yeah.
point of view.
Yeah, I think it's all the above, and I think that one of the things that secular humanists, get right is I do believe that God's created us to be, inventive, to be intelligent, to have a yearning. There's a reason why the scientific revolution happened, and faith played a really big part in the reason why it happened. um, because people wanted to understand more about who God was. And the more that we discover about nature, the more that we discover about the universe that God's created, the more we discover about who He is. And so I do think that in that sense, it's not unreasonable to think that we might get to Mars someday, that we might establish a colony, that we might do these things. I think that's a valiant thing to want to strive for, even as a Christian. As a Christian, I would grow up, and if you want to be an astronaut, or you want to be, the first person on SpaceX to go to Mars, well, I'd say that's a great thing, because you have a hunger and a thirst and a curiosity for the universe that God has created, and you want to explore it, understand it, and learn more about it. I don't think that God has deceived us in the way that He's made the world. This is a completely other video, but that's one of the arguments. That's one of the tensions I have with young Earth creationism. I think I made a video about that, but
I watched that,
um,
yeah.
and I don't think God's made a world that's deceptive or confusing. I think that it's complicated, and I think that He's an infinite God, and He's made a world where we can just continue to learn about Him through it for as long as we live. So I'll say that that part is right. But another thing I'll say is, um, one thing that we hear, or I should say, read about in the book of Judges over and over and over again. There's a phrase, and the phrase is, "And everyone did what was right in their own eyes." And I think that's important because, number one, it's an argument for depravity. As we've talked about, I believe that everyone's born depraved, that we're all born separate from God, and that our natural inclination is selfishness, pride, deceit. Our natural inclination is towards sin because, as Paul says, we're in bondage to sin. So I believe that the internet, in many ways, has been a good thing, but in a lot of ways, it's been a really bad thing. Because if you take 300 million people who naturally want to do what's right in their own eyes, and you connect them all together, you have 300 million people who want to do what's right in their own eyes, aware of everyone else, all the other 299 million people who want to do what's right in their eyes. And you have chaos. And that's why that's one of the reasons why I believe that today we now live in an age where you have to question everything, trust nobody, and double check everything. And we're suspicious of everything that's said, because if everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes, there's going to be conflict. in a million different ways. This person over here says that you shouldn't drink water because it has fluoride in it. This person over here says you should only drink water because, um, everything else is going to kill you, or you shouldn't eat fruit. But this other person says you should eat fruit. And there's so many different perspectives, so many different opinions. We live in an age where, number one, information is accessible in the matter of seconds. Anyone can be an expert on anything in just a matter of minutes, just by taking out their phone and asking Gemini, ChatGPT, whatever. As a result, everyone's become an expert on everything and anything. And so you have a million people who are talking and maybe like 4 guys who are listening. No one listens anymore because the idea of an expert has died, because now everyone can be an expert on anything at any time. And so you have conflicting ideas about the world, conflicting ideas about truth. And that is one of the biggest goals of the enemy, is for us to be uncertain about what truth is. Because if 300 million people have confused each other about what the truth is, because we're all doing what's right in our own eyes, we're all saying what we think is true, we're all saying our perspective, we want everyone else to listen to our perspective, well, then we're not going to know what truth is. And the hope of the enemy is that we won't know what the truth of the gospel is either. And that's exactly what the enemy's hope is, that we'll be so confused, so divided, that we don't know what truth is, that we have to question everything, we have to be skeptical of everything, that we'll also be skeptical of the resurrection of Jesus. We'll also be skeptical of his death. We'll also be skeptical of his divinity. We'll be skeptical of everything. And that's why you have 300 different flavors of denominations. That's why you have, the progressive theology. That's why you have things that have come out of Christianity, because it's the enemy's attempt at dividing and confusing. Now, we both know ultimately the enemy has already lost and continues to lose, because those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be called sons of God. It doesn't matter how confused our truth gets, God's truth abideth still. And I think that, to get back to the question just for a minute, I think that's one of the places that I would start, is to recognize that God's truth always abides, and it always remains, and it is always true. And as a Christian, the more that I am devoting myself to the Word of God, the more that I'm devoting myself to prayer in relationship with God, relationship with Jesus, the more that I am listening to the Holy Spirit, the more I will know for sure and with utter confidence what the truth of the gospel is. That is the only truth that has sufficient meaning in my life. Now, you might say, okay, well, how do we know which conspiracies should be concerned with? How do we know, are there conspiracies that we should consider, or should we just throw all of them out? Well, I think Paul's words for us in 1 Timothy are helpful. In 1 Timothy 1:4, he urges believers not to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies which promote speculation rather than the stewardship from God that is by faith. And I think the last part is important. There's the stewardship from God that is by faith. How do we discern which things that we should be concerned about? How does it impact the stewardship that God's called me to? For example, if someone comes up to me and they say, hey, 5G is going to rot your brain, or they're going to use 5G to try and mind control you. Well, there's a difference there. If they say, well, 5G is going to rot your brain, okay, well, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but we live right next to a 5G tower. And as a husband and a father, I need to be a good steward of my family. So I think I'm going to just look into this a little bit just to see if there's any credence to it. Because if it is the case that 5G is going to hurt my family, I have a biblical mandate to care for my family as a man. And I need to remove my family from that situation, go somewhere else. That's something that concerns my calling to be a steward in whatever avenue. As Christians are called to be stewards in many different avenues. We're called to be a steward of God's creation. We're called to be a steward of one another, of the church. We're called to be stewards of our family as men. So that would. But if someone says, well, they're going to use 5G to control your mind when they initiate Project Bluebeam. Okay. Does that affect my ability to be a steward of what God's called me to? Not really. I'm willing to like enlighten someone or entertain, I should say. I'm willing to entertain someone and like sure, like I'll listen to what you have to say about Project Bluebeam. Like I'm totally down. Yeah, this is great. This is entertainment, but it's not something that I should exhaust my energy towards because it's not something that has to do with the stewardship from God that is by faith. And so I think those two things are really what I would say just to get to the question. Really, what I would say is first is God's sovereignty, trust and have faith in God's sovereignty, and the second thing would be recognize those parts of our lives that we are called to be stewards of, and be concerned with those. So, like, if someone's telling me, like, "Hey, Tylenol causes autism," I'm gonna be like, "Okay, I should probably figure that out because my wife takes Tylenol. I think that's important for me to be a steward of my family. So let me do a little bit of digging. But I know that there's a limit. I know that what I need to do is just figure out if I can trust whether or not autism or Tylenol causes autism. If there's enough evidence to suggest that it does, then we just won't take Tylenol. See, one of the things that is important is if I am in God's word, in prayer, trusting in God, trusting in the Spirit, and I'm in relationship with Him, I believe that when I do seek to understand whether or not Tylenol is something that is important for us to stop taking as a family, I believe that God will give us the answer that we're looking for. I 100% believe that. Um, and so those would be, I think, my closing thoughts on the question. Um, what would kind of your thoughts be on specifically, and I guess in a practical sense, how can we practically as Christians apply what we've been talking about today kind of to the way that we interact with conspiracies just on a daily basis?
Yeah, I like the way you said about like kind of be discerning, and if it's impacting you, kind of look into that versus like if it's just kind of out there and it's like we can't control it no matter what, if it's true or not, like kind of let that be. And I think it should ultimately go back to the goal of like, is this about me, or how am I furthering God's word? How am I being at peace with all
Mhm.
people? That really sticks with me for whatever reason. Um, because well, there is no peace, like you said, like modern society now, like it's absolutely crazy. And it's like, how do you be at peace with everybody when everybody's kind of going all their ways? Like you said, what do you say,
Mhm.
300 million ways, or how, however many, like it's really hard to be at peace with 300 million people with different
Mhm.
points of views. I like you said, listening to people, letting them speak their piece. um and I think too, like, going, you said like about Tylenol, right? Specifically, like
Mhm.
we do know like people are flawed, right? Like Tylenol's not going to be like, actually, yeah, sorry guys. Like they're never going to say that, right? Like, so
Mhm.
we're never going to actually get the truth. Like you said, like if you think it is, then don't take it. If not, then like take it
Mhm.
like this. It's, move on. Like, but you just have to understand, like we're in this world that's fallen, and we need to be that light in the darkness. And it's just, it's hard. I think knowing this about yourself, and I think what I liked about this conversation today is like I've watched a lot of your videos in the past couple of days, and it's like all kind of coming together. You're pulling from all these different past conversations, like we're talking about the politics and um, you know, just different things. Like it is all connected, and it's good to wrestle with these thoughts to kind of know, like, I'm having this feeling like I'm struggling with people. Like
Mhm.
you say all the time in your videos, like we need to be in community, and that's
Mhm.
a hard thing for me, right? And
Mhm.
you have a video about introverted and extroverted. Like I'm very introverted, and it's hard for me to be out there with people and to establish community. And it's easier for me to think and be internal in here, and kind of, like you say, go
Mhm.
down that rabbit hole of just like I could be stuck in here for forever, right? Like
Mhm.
so like just being aware of yourself, being understanding of your weaknesses and strengths, um, is important, because no matter if there's true conspiracies or not, like the government's there, God's in control, we all know
Mhm.
people are corrupt, but we, like you said, at the same time we're doing great things. Humans are doing great things as well. So it all comes
Mhm.
back to bringing glory to God, and
Mhm.
it's just that's easier said than done. One thing I always think about too is like Peter walking on the water to Jesus and the wave comes crashing. I remember being in like church growing up. I'm like that guy's dumb. Like he's Jesus is right there, right? Like but it's like now I'm like there are waves every day coming at me, right, and coming at everybody. Like you said, there's so much out there, so much division, and like you said, it's coming. It's on, it's coming from Satan, and it's easy to get those waves and look at the waves and look at the problems that are coming and not looking at Jesus and saying like that's our guiding light. Like you said,
Mhm.
if there is no guiding light, it's just chaos out there.
Mhm.
But he's like the true north star. Like we need to focus on that, and just kind of being aware. Like for me at least, like it is hard, and it's you know we we have UFOs out there, right? Like
Mhm.
that's a thing, right? That just got released. Like that, don't let that distract from um, the true north, right? That
Mhm.
Jesus is God, and we want to help as many people find that as possible. So
Yeah,
um, I
absolutely.
appreciate all that you do, and having these conversations. Because like I said, I think it's really important to get that all out there, especially in this culture that is kind of
Mhm.
crazy. Like we need to talk about this and listen, and do our best
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
bring glory to God. So
Yeah, absolutely. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And I think that if that is the aim, if that is the life description of us, I think conspiracy theories won't be something that really bring us so much weight and the division or paranoia into our lives. I think that the pursuit of conspiracy theories or endless genealogies, as Paul puts it, often yields anxiety. It yields anger, paranoia, a hyperfixation on darkness, rather than a focus on the redemptive work of Christ. And I think that one of the things that we could ask ourselves is my research into this topic producing a fruit of the Spirit, or is it producing fear? Is it producing stewardship that God's called me to, or is it producing division? And so I think that testing the spirits to see that they are far from God, I think is so important, utterly important. And one of the ways that we do that in prayer, in the Word, and in community. Those are the triad of of our lives. And I heard that a lot growing up because I grew up in a very conservative, fundamental church growing up, and when I was a kid, especially when I was a teenager, it was drilled into me like you got to be doing, you got to be in the Word, you got to be in prayer, you got to be, and so much so that if I wasn't doing those things, then there were people in the church that gave me this impression that there's something wrong with my soul. It's like, oh, he doesn't go to the Bible study. There must be something spiritually wrong with him. And for a lot of people, that pushed him away from the church. And for me, it did for a little while, for several years actually. But when I ultimately came back to faith, which was at LBC actually, when I came back to faith and grew and in my walk with God, I began to realize that there was some truth to what they were saying. I think that they were saying in a very legalistic sense, which is dangerous, but I think there's truth to it because those three things bring closeness in your relationship to God, and through that relationship, He'll give you discernment. So, Eric, it's been awesome having you. This has been such a great topic, man. Such a good
mm,
conversation. Anything you want to
real
say before we end out?
well, I want to derail this now.
Oh,
So
oh,
you know
okay.
so I just want your take on the UFO files, just because
Oh, okay.
we're not gonna believe it, right? Or like you said, we're focused on Jesus, but like it's there. It just got
Right.
released. Like, and
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you had a chance to look through that, or like what your thoughts are on UFOs and things like
Right.
that. Just because, like, we're not. It's just speculation. We're just kind of we're
Yeah.
reacting to the government, like it's so.
Yeah. These
Uh,
were just released
Curious
today,
on your
so
thoughts.
I'll
Yeah.
uh I'll share my thoughts and then we'll end it out. But I I've always been of the predisposition that what we consider to be extraterrestrial beings are not extraterrestrial. They're more than likely spiritual beings. I am also of the predisposition that the overwhelming majority of reports, sightings, phenomena um, have rational explanations, but there are many that don't. And I am willing to believe that these interactions are spiritual in nature, not extraterrestrial in nature. And one of the reasons, one of the small reasons why I believe that is I remember watching one of something Greer. Is it? I forgot his first name for some reason. Not Richard Greer. Is it Richard? Not Richard Greer. He's one of the biggest voices in the UFO community, and he had made a documentary called I think no, it was on the Disclosure. It was a documentary where he talked about his process of contacting extraterrestrials, and um, I'm gonna look up his name just real second, so I have that for you. But he made this documentary about, hold on, Stephen Greer. That's his name, Stephen Greer. Greer founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, CSETI, and the Disclosure Project, which claims to seek the disclosure of alleged classified UFO information. Stephen Greer, he's one of the biggest voices in the community, and he made this documentary where he's talking about his process of contacting UFOs. And he would have these meetings where people would come out to this session. There'd be like, 10, 20, 30 people that would come out to a session. It'd be nighttime, and they're in the desert or something, and they're looking up at the sky. And what he's describing to me sounded like a seance. It sounded like he was summoning something. And the way that he's talking about his interactions with these aliens, it's just it sounds like he's talking about interactions with demonic forces. And so that really struck me as very interesting. And so I do tend to have that predisposition. I think much of ultimately I don't think that the US government has technology that has given them, I don't think the US government has alien technology that they've been able to re-engineer or reverse engineer and create anti-gravity machines with. I could be wrong, but I just don't believe that. Um, but I am willing to believe that there are forces, people out there who might or might not be a part of the government, who they might not be satanic per se, but they are either controlled or influenced by demonic forces. That I absolutely believe. I think if anything, the Epstein files has proven that there are things that people do that as a Christian I would absolutely say is influenced by demonic forces. So that's kind of my quick take on the UFO file releases. I don't necessarily think we're going to find anything ground or world shattering. I don't think that there's going to be anything that's faith shattering. Again, there might not be because none of us really know. We don't know until we know. That's just the truth. But from my experience, from my knowledge, just from my belief, I really don't think we will. And I think it'll be just a lot of videos of things that people couldn't explain. Some of them might be supernatural, but I think the majority of them aren't. But that would be my quick take. What's your quick take?
Well, yeah, I put you on the spot, and I think again everything's connected. You did
Yeah.
a Halloween episode. You're at Gandalf the Grey. I think that was
Oh yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, kind of similar, right? Like I think there's a spiritual realm, and there's quite possibly that could be spiritual in nature. I do think that governments, like other governments, could have things that we don't know about, like what I mean, or like we know it, like but the government can't release it, like um, that happens all the time. Like I think of the SR-71 Blackbird. If you ever look up
Mhm.
that, like that looks like
Yeah.
that's from like science fiction. Like that's so cool. But
Yeah.
they made that like in they designed it in 1940s or 50s. They had to make things to build it out of titanium because they didn't have the tools and stuff for it. So
Mhm.
like, again, like I think there's humans can do a lot of like crazy stuff, right? Like, so it could be things that like in 20, 30 years when we're old, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we've had this for years and that's
Mhm.
what that was. Sorry, you
Right.
know. But absolutely, I think the spiritual realm is real, and the Bible makes that pretty clear, and also clear not to mess with that. Like, um, like Egyptians did crazy stuff, like with the staff,
Mhm.
like Moses, they did the same thing that Moses did. Like, so it is kind of, it makes me just wonder, like you said, like, is that a spiritual thing? And, um, again, like what, we don't know until we know, but again, going back to our, real conversation, like, it's kind of fun to talk and speculate, but, ultimately, Jesus is in control, and that's what I believe. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, Eric, it's been really great having you. Maybe we'll have you on again, talk about some more UFOs. Maybe we'll talk about Bigfoot next time, but
right.
talk about
Yeah.
some other things.
Well,
But
then, yeah, my wife's going to talk to you about why I'm an idiot. So,
no,
so
nah,
yeah,
absolutely not. No. But yeah, no, it's been good to have you. And thanks for coming on the show. Hope you have an awesome night.
appreciate it. Thanks to you too, Adam.
Thanks.